All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Protect Your Business from a Cyber Attack. My name is Ashley Limbers, and I'll be your moderator. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Total Computer Solutions, and I'm excited to be hosting this session today. Total Computer Solutions is a full-service provider of IT support and services, including network security, cloud computing, network administration, and managed backup services in Central North Carolina. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Andy Purcell. Andy is our business consultant at TCS. He has over 20 years of IT and security consulting experience. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Andy holds certifications from VMware, Citrix, EMC, and is a Cisco Business Value Specialist. This invaluable combination of education and experience helps Andy find TCS clients the right solution to grow their business. Before I hand the mic over to Andy, I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover about this presentation and the Zoom platform. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and will be emailed to you afterwards. Next, we would love to hear from you during today's webinar. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to type it into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterward. And last, I'd like to encourage you to give us feedback on today's webinar. You will see a link in your browser when the webinar ends. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our business consultant, Andy Purcell. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you also for everyone who's attending today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn about cybersecurity and how to protect your business from attacks. This is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so I think it's very, very apropos time for us to be having this conversation. And I think also it's very key. These times that we're in today are rife with opportunity for exploitation from folks that have sort of nefarious goals in mind. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go, and maybe give you some ideas about how to combat that, how to make sure you stay safe. And then also some ammunition to go to management to talk about what you need to do to continue to increase that and put a full cybersecurity strategy in place. And we would certainly be very, very happy to help out with that. So as we start through our presentation today, I'd like to begin with a video. You should be able to hear sound through the PC itself. It is from YouTube. It really gives an insight into what it says, the anatomy of attack. How does it take place? What starts it? Who's really responsible for it? And what the results can be. It's only about 4 minutes long. I think it's kind of enjoyable. So hopefully you will, you'll enjoy that as well. So we'll start that, and then afterward we'll resume the presentation.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicart, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because they're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Katie, are you on your way into the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Give me a call when you get this.
Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main.
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. You pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that they'll
pay it? Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicart is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed lower today, led by Qualicart, which was down 14% on news that the recent data breach may be far worse than the company originally
Its stock fell
acknowledged.
to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
That's a rather sobering video. Interesting to see also the lady's perspective, in that all she's doing is writing some code. It's just a job she was paid for, and you know, she retrieved some files, but she didn't hurt those people. She didn't cost that fellow his job. She didn't cause the stock to go down. So in her mind, she just did a job. She got the files out. Well, this is how it works. It goes from what seems to be fairly simple in her mind to an attack on the entire company, to then using that attack as a distraction to pull files and data out, releasing that to the public, and then lowering the stock of the company. And in some cases, companies go out of business. So if you think about it, that really is, you know, the anatomy of the way the ultimate attack would go, and the ultimate hacker's goal is to bring a company down. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through, but it does make you wake up a little bit and see some of what is possible potentially. So as we go into looking at cybersecurity as a big issue, as opposed to the individual issue we saw in the video, we begin with the fact of how many people are on the internet. Okay, internet users today, 6 billion users, and that's only going to go up. And if you think about that as an individual, how many devices do you use every day? You're obviously on a machine now. Could be a laptop, could be a phone, could be a desktop. So that's 3 that you have now. Perhaps you have separate laptops or work at home, and we raise that number further. Certainly your TV, your game system, maybe even your refrigerator is connected to the internet. So how many devices do you have access to every day that are connecting or interacting with the internet? And it is a fairly staggering number if you start to think about that, and then multiply that number times the number of individuals or internet users. And that's kind of where we are today in the modern age. We've all heard of incidents, locally and globally, of how many, whether you want to call them cyber attacks, whether you want to call them breaches, whether it's just simply ransomware. But Marriott had a massive breach. 500 million people's information was involved. You see Yahoo, basically all of their accounts. I've got a Yahoo account that I probably haven't used in 10 years, but whatever information in that has been has been leaked now. You think locally, we know that Rockingham County school system had a breach a few years ago. Mecklenburg County itself, the county where Charlotte is, had a massive breach. Very old system, so by the time that they shut those down, it actually stopped the permitting process. Whether you get a marriage license, whether you're going to get a new business permit, a building permit, that process was stopped completely. So you really brought the county of Mecklenburg to its knees. Individual businesses get hit. You've probably heard a story very similar to the one we saw in the video, where a hacker sends an email into a company, and they happen to know the CEO. They've studied for a year. Maybe they've put some sort of a tracker on his email. They know what his signature is. They know the voice he speaks, like the lady mentioned in the video, how he sounds, how he talks to his employees. And he was able to send through a message in the voice of the CEO because he knew that CEO was on vacation. And you ask, how did he know? Well, he was tracking the guy. He knew that he was out of town with his family. He even knew that his family was going on a ziplining adventure that day. Yeah, how could he possibly know that? The CEO had put it all on Facebook. He put pictures of he and his family at the zipline location. And so what this hacker did, or what the creator of the ransomware did, was to send that message saying, hey, the girls and I are going ziplining. I'm not going to be in this afternoon, but I really need you to send a check to this vendor for $35,000. Vendor was real. Money was real. Message from the real account of the CEO. All that wasn't real was the wire transfer number. By the time that information came out and everybody became aware of it, it was far too late to retrieve that money. There was simply a bank on the other end that the wire had gone to, and the account had been closed. So they're very, very skillful at finding out information, and most of it is what we post. When you went to the beach this summer, did you tell everybody on Facebook where you were and what you were doing? It's a great way to send up a flag for anyone who's paying attention to come and rob your house, steal something for your yard, break into your cars that are left at the house, that kind of thing. So it is very important to remember that's where some of these guys get their information. The rate of cyber attacks, particularly on small businesses, is increasing. All right, 61% of businesses had some sort of type of attack in 2017. And you can only imagine, as we sit here in 2020, how much larger that number must be. Now, this attack could simply be somebody sending in a ransomware or phishing attempt. Doesn't mean that anything came of it. Maybe you saw it, maybe you recognized the email, maybe you didn't click on it, but this is how many attempts take place. It could be someone simply sending a bot looking at your network and trying to find an open port. So something like that. But that's how many businesses have an attempt at a cyber attack in a given year. Okay, 54% achieve a breach. And to be clear, an intrusion and a breach are different. I may try to get into your business. I may get as far as your firewall, but a breach means that someone has gotten inside. A breach means that they have gotten away with some kind of data. So that's very key to remember the difference between simply having an intrusion or someone having a breach and that incident turning into something major. Once you have a breach, you then have to report that. You do not have to report the attacks up until that point. And if you think businesses will fall victim to a ransomware attack every 7 or 11 seconds rather by next year, and that simply means somebody is sending in an email from the outside, maybe like the one that we described, maybe like the one in the video, maybe as simple as trying to mimic your bank. And that you may or may not interact with that, but you've got to know what you're looking for. And we will talk later about what to look for, ways to avoid those sorts of attacks. But I think it's important to know that this is happening on a daily basis. Luckily, we catch most of them. Your firewall start most of the intrusions and catch them on the way through. So firewall is critical in your environment. Email training is critical in your environment so that you know what's coming in, and you know what to click on and what not to. If you look at the top factors, every organization, and what maybe creates the problem or what stops you from preventing the problem, these go in decreasing order from a lack of resources. You're simply not spending money on firewalls or keeping firewalls up to date. You're not hardening those devices with your environment, your switches, your routers. You're not making sure that those are protected properly. Maybe internally, you look at a lack of understanding within your company, And this is primarily what we talked about, not knowing what to look for in an email. It's just very, very simply, you want your folks not to click on a link. They can hover over the link, they can see where it goes. Maybe they find out it's not really to Bank of America. Maybe it's an email address you didn't understand. Maybe it's not Wells Fargo. Maybe that URL is spelled with capital I's instead of L's. So to the naked eye, it looks like the right address. Those are the kinds of tricks that are played by these ransomware attacks. Maybe again, it's simply lack of information. You didn't know to look. You didn't know what was possible. You weren't sure whether you did wire transfers or not, and therefore somebody attempts to do one. Even the legal and the real estate industries, which are probably the ones that have most commonly used wire transfers, are beginning to go away from them because of the vulnerability there. At a minimum, call and verify the wire transfer, the bank account number, and all that information with the recipient before you send anything out. But that lack of information often can be what comes back and bites us. Sometimes it's a time issue. I know it's hard to take time out of a day to do email training. I know it's hard out of the day to spend that 15, 20, or 30 minutes going through an online presentation. Maybe it's even harder to get people to give up their lunch or to give up an hour during their day of productivity time to sit through a presentation very much like this one. Thank you for being here. But it's that lack of time often that keeps us from preparing. We talk often about training and the lack of training. I think this is in every one of the other sections. It says 9%. I suspect lack of resources prevents us from getting training, lack of expertise or understanding because we haven't had the training, lack of the information for the same reason, and then ultimately the time and the training go hand in hand. You have to dedicate some time to be able to prevent all of this. And then there are a number of other small reasons that are out there, maybe individual, maybe job task, maybe there's a machine that's not connected to anything because of its age, but it cannot be updated properly because it runs an application that's 100 years old. So those are the reasons and the different percentages that we see as far as why attacks are occurring and why they're increasing. We want to look at the types of criminals or cyber criminals. External actors is like the video that we saw. It's like that person that's sending in the ransomware. Somebody maybe that's running bots to look at open ports. Those are external actors. Typically, those may be individuals. And then there's the second component of the same thing, which is organized. It may be from an organized crime standpoint. I know Southeast Asia right now is a hot spot for lots of these syndicates or groups that are going out and they're sending out these bots in mass. And their whole job is just to find an open port. So when you think, hey, I'm only a 6-person CPA firm. I'm only a manufacturer that makes widgets and we've got 20 people. That's fine. These bots don't care. They're looking for that open port that can be exploited. And then they sell that information to somebody who will go out and carry out the functional exploit itself. So to think I'm too small, I don't make a product somebody cares about, my company's not worth a lot of money, that's irrelevant to these folks, particularly when you have the organized criminal groups. These are the ones that will simply look for an open port and they don't care whether you make $1 billion or $100,000 a year. The next, and one of the most common and maybe the most dangerous, are internal actors. And this may be somebody who has an axe to grind. This may be somebody who you have released and still has access into your network. Or this could just be somebody who makes a mistake. They click on that link. They allow somebody into the building that they shouldn't because they're wearing a jumpsuit from the phone company that looks like the right person. These are a lot of times, accidental, well-meaning people. But one of the big things we'll talk about later today is these people who are coming into your business from the outside. We need to spot them. These phone calls, these emails, that we need to know how to suss them out and realize that they're dangerous. And a lot of these are simply internal actors who don't mean well in some cases, and in some cases don't mean ill. It's just a matter of educating everyone so that we know who they are. Partner actors is not as common, but this is someone you do business with, a supplier, a vendor, a customer, someone in their organization using their ability to get in. If you've got a portal, maybe they come in that way. If you've got someone you pay, they may trying to get you to send money into a personal account rather than a business account. So partner actors are people with whom you do business that might jeopardize, your environment or your network. And then you have multiple parties, and this would be something that is, perhaps an organized group who then would sell that video, the information to an individual like in the video. So that's what a multiple party or multiple level, multiple layer attack would look like. If you want to look at the how, that was perhaps the who of cybersecurity. Here's really the how. Hackers used to be the thing that everybody was worried about. It was the guy in the hoodie in his mother's basement, right? Well, that's kind of gone away. They are much more organized now, like we just talked about. They are sometimes even nation states. We've talked about in the news, North Korea, possibly China, having divisions, cyber divisions of their military, their armed forces that are engaged in hacking. So it's really not that guy in the hoodie anymore sitting in the basement. These are really nation state actors or corporate actors that are trying to hack. And hack simply means a brute force or finding an open port and getting into your network that way. Breaches, we discussed earlier, the difference between a hack and a breach or an intrusion, and it's simply meaning somebody getting away with something. What do they take from your business? Is it data? Is it information? Rarely can they get in and get money directly. They want to get that account information. So that's what we're talking about with breaches. Social attacks, much like my example in the story of the CEO who put all his information on Facebook, they're able to go through Facebook and data mine information about that CEO. Perhaps they're able to go through your Facebook page and ask for a quote or ask for information, maybe retrieve data from you that leads them into a different kind of attack. Social engineering, I touched on just a moment on the last slide, and that is somebody is going to drop a flash drive in the parking lot, knowing you're going to pick it up, and somebody, if I drop 100 outside of an office building, somebody will pick one up and stick it in their machine to see what's on the flash drive. Often what's on that flash drive could be some malicious code that may start an attack, or it may open up a breach for someone else at a later time. Social engineering can also be that guy coming to your office looking very much like they're from the phone company, the cable company, and saying, hey, I just need to take a quick peek at the server. I need to take a quick peek into your phone connection. I need to look at your fiber real quick. And you let them in because it makes perfect sense. They say they're from Spectrum. They say they're from whoever else you may do business with. You let them in the door. It's that social engineering that you need to also be aware of. Malware may come from an attack. Malware may come from that flash drive in the parking lot. Malware may come from somebody clicking on a link in an email. A lot of times, and perhaps in the example of the CEO who has information on Facebook, they may install a piece of malware where all it does is track email for a year. So the lady in the video was able to find out, heard the CEO of Qualicart's information, how he spoke, what his signature looked like on his email, how he sounded, phrases that he used. So you may have malware sitting on your network today doing nothing but watching your email going in and out, stealing the email, stealing passwords, finding information for a future attack. So those are things that we need to be aware of. Misuse. I had an individual call me the other day, and within his company, he had an administrator even who was reading emails that he shouldn't. They were getting into accounts that for most people were going to be blocked or were going to be have passwords on them. Because he was an administrator, he was getting there looking at financial data. How much money did the company make? How much did individuals make? So you may have users that are accessing information that they shouldn't. Maybe they're just nosy. Maybe they're selling it to somebody else outside. Great example is a company who flew a lot of people in for training at their location and also did some external training. So to them, the most valuable information was that client data, okay? Because it's not what hotel they're staying, it's what credit card they're using to pay that hotel. So that's the kind of thing that can come internally. And then get physical actions, and they are exactly what it sounds like. Someone's destroying hardware, someone's destroying a server, someone is damaging something inside of your business. That's what the physical actions are. So you don't see as much of that, and some of that is incidental. It's mice in the server room chewing through cables and things like that. But they definitely are things that may result in lowered or reduction of service within your company. So that's the how some of these things take place. And then I'll go through this fairly quickly because some of this is similar information. but it's types of data that people can get after. What do they want? At the end of the day, that's the bottom line. Getting into your system is one thing, but it's knowing what you need to protect is something else. So they can gain your email. They can gain your access to your social platforms. That may or may not sound like a big deal, but as we learned earlier, knowing your email information, being able to pull off some of that signature information, seeing who's doing social media, seeing how they speak, terms they use, making sure it sounds the same, you can then break into that account on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and put out a malicious message to the public in the voice of whoever's been writing those messages, whoever the marketing department has used. And so it sounds like it's coming from the company. And suddenly your social platforms have become a vehicle for hackers and folks to either employ malware or to selling the reputation of the company. They get system configuration. Someone gets in and gets the system configuration for your server, they then can share that with someone who can get into your server for malicious intent. So that is very critical as well. Contacts, phone numbers, as I mentioned a moment ago, credit card information, maybe whoever handles travel within your company. Nobody thinks anyone would want to hack their system, but if they do have credit card information, suddenly it becomes a very critical thing to protect. The next one, further about payment card and financials, bank account numbers, routing numbers and bank account numbers for other companies. How do you send out malicious messages to other companies in the voice and the name of your company? That's very often the way some of these exploits begin, that ask for wire transfers. ABC company sends a message to XYZ and saying, hey, you owe us the $35,000. Can you transfer that into our account today rather than sending a check? And the account is false and malicious, and suddenly that $35,000 is gone. And you can bet that XYZ is going to call you back up and say, hey, you're responsible. You owe us the $35,000 that's now lost. Passwords, usernames, all of that is critical. Obviously, get you into accounts, get you into your email, get you into servers, get you into other appliances within the company and other devices. Sensitive photos and background. We've probably all got some music, maybe some pictures on our hard drives, where we'll store them, especially if it's a dual use machine for work and home. Maybe they get those vacation pictures and use those in an exploit like we discussed in our initial example. Bills and contracts. Again, all of this contain information about account numbers and about how you do business and about who your customers are. So this is what they're after. We've talked about the who, the how, and the what. This is the what they're going after, which means this is the what that we have to protect. We did speak a little bit about the human element earlier. 25%, or something in that range, could even be a little bit higher as we go into 2020 and 21, are coming from internal sources. Again, we all paint this picture in our head of a disgruntled employee who's no longer there. Yeah, it could be that. And that's pretty easy to fix. You restrict all of their access, you change all of your passwords. But this could just as easily be someone inside who with intent or without intent is sharing this information and sharing it out to others who may be there for bad reasons. So let's make sure that when people do leave the company, we want to change that information immediately. We want to change the passwords, and it's always a pain. We'll talk about passwords here in a second. I know it's difficult. I know that it's an arduous task to change those passwords and then remember new ones, but the penalty sometimes for not doing so can be very significant. The big news about passwords is they can be stolen. They're often very weak. Often they're not changed very often. We go into companies and we do assessments for them of their network. We do a security assessment, and we will find passwords that are 5 and 6 years old. Guess what our passwords were 5 and 6 years ago? They were 5 characters. They were 6 characters. They were your dog's name, right? So it's very important that we know what our passwords are, that we change them, that we update them, okay? Passwords are stolen. You know how they're usually stolen? Because they're on a sticky note on your laptop or on your monitor. All right, so if you're sitting in Starbucks, which is a whole other issue, but if you're sitting in Starbucks and you've got your password on your laptop and someone sees you typing that in, they take a picture as they walk by, they look at it, they read it. You have folks that are in those environments that have key loggers and things like that they can have you log in through a device called a pineapple. We'll talk about pineapples in a little bit, but you're giving them those passwords when you put that sticky note on your machine. Okay, it's almost giving to them as well when your passwords are so weak. If it is 468 characters and it's only alpha or it's only numeric, it's very, very simple. We had a white hat hacker come to our panel discussion that we did a year ago. And what he said is that technology today is so great, it takes a matter of seconds for the software he uses to crack an 8-digit alphanumeric password. So all the time that you've put into thinking up that password and maybe used it for 5 or 6 years, it's gone in seconds as soon as someone decides they want to crack that. Okay. So we talk about the 10 and 12 letter passwords. We talk about not only alphanumeric, but special characters. Today, we're even moving away from that and moving to passphrases. Maybe they're 20 characters long, but it's a phrase that means something to you. Maybe it's unique to whatever you're getting into. Maybe it's unique to a client, and you're using those phrases and they're different. I 100% understand 20 characters is long. I totally agree it's hard having different passwords for everything. I completely sympathize with you when you say that you've got to have a separate password for every client. However, it takes weeks, days, and even months to crack that 20-character passphrase, okay, especially when it has some special characters in it, that it does that 8-character. So there is a trade-off between security on the one hand and difficulty and ease of use and everything on the other hand. So I would highly encourage you to take a look at those passwords, take a look at those devices and see, are they up to date? Are they patched? Take a look at how you're securing your data, because very often these are the ways that people are getting in there, and it's the simplest thing to do, but it's sometimes also the most difficult to get people to do them. A plug here for applications that will track your passwords for you. If you do have 100 of them, if you have 30 of them, whatever the number is, use one of those. LastPass is one that we use, but there are tons of them that are out there. Let it keep those passwords for you. Let it save those for you. It has been encrypted, so it's extremely difficult for someone to get into that. It is the same principle as how your browser saves your passwords today. But think about it. If I'm in there for malicious reasons, the first thing I'm going to do is to crack into the passwords on your machine. So I would encourage you to use a third-party application for that. Moving on now, more than 3/4 of businesses have reported phishing attacks. Okay, these are generally through the email. Somebody will send out 100,000 emails hoping for 10 hits. But if you're one of those 10 that hits, whether it's ransomware, whether it's simply giving someone credentials or passwords, this is exactly how behavior within your company is going to lead you to some of these troubles. This is that social interaction from the other side, and this is the human error from your side. So when we think about that, it is training that's critical. It is email ransomware training. I'll give you a great example that we saw internally. We've got a client who came to us, and they were just joining us a year ago, and they kept putting off our installation date. We'd all agreed everything was great. It was going to be Wednesday, then it was going to be Thursday, then wait, it's got to be 2 weeks. Well, the day before we went in and installed our tools on their site, they were hit with a ransomware attack. Somebody clicked on a link that they shouldn't have. In this case, the request, I think, was only $5,000 because it's a very small company. And typically, you'll find a lot of these attacks, they know enough about your business to know not to ask a $1 million company for $1 million ransom. They'll ask for $5,000 or $10,000. In this case, they did. They encrypted and they locked up every bit of the data that's on his server. He lost billing. He lost scheduling. He lost track of history. His latest backup had been 3 or 4 months earlier. So even trying to go install that, the backup failed. And so he was looking at a complete loss of the data from his business. We were able to help him to some extent, but in this case, getting back that data, recovering that hard drive was going to cost him as much as the ransom was going to be. Again, I suspect that's not an accident from the purveyors of ransomware. They know they're going to ask you for about the same amount of money it would cost for you to go to have a hard drive professionally recovered. In this case, the only option that we had was to negotiate, and we were able to negotiate down to about 1/4 of what they were asking for. And so he was able to get his money back. They gave it to him. We moved forward. Get his data back at the risk of his money, and we're able to move forward. So it worked out fine. but those are the risks that are out there and the exposure that you have. The social engineering is what we talked a little bit about. We can talk about some specific examples here. It's a message coming in. It's no longer a prince looking for you to help him get the money out of his bank to get his inheritance. It's very detailed, and here's a letter that's similar to the one that we talked about in the video. This is the one that you're getting a lot lately. Bob from Microsoft. Maybe it's the IRS. Maybe it's somebody from Social Security Administration. None of these organizations are going to ask you for your information over the phone. They're all going to contact you via a letter, and you're going to contact them back via the phone. Do not respond to Microsoft, IRS, or Social Security Administration when they call your house. If you want to have the same sort of conversation, you can call them, you can call us, you can call somebody else to make sure something is legitimate. But it's the same idea. Your cable company, your phone company, your bank, they're not going to send you an email asking you for credentials. All right, they're going to contact you via the app. Their app may have notifications turned on there. They're going to contact you possibly via email, but I would even highly question that when it comes through. But they're not going to call you, and usually not going to email you. Go to that bank, go to that provider, go to that phone company, and see what they have in their message center. Do not just assume that it's real because you do business with the company. Again, that URL from Wells Fargo could have capital I's put in instead of L's and look real. That Bank of America may be B0A.com instead of BOA.com. It's going to look very real, but make sure that you're going to be skeptical of everything you read, because these are attempts at social engineering. We covered earlier dropping the flash drives in the parking lot. So these also very real, happens every day. If I go out and buy 100 flash drives and drop them in the parking lot, 10 people will take them and stick them into their flash drives just to see what's on it. Okay, the tactics, and again, we've covered some of this in our conversations to this point. Social engineering tactics in person. That's that phone company, cable company, or other supplier. Could be somebody in the janitorial staff coming into the business. All they need to do is get in the door. Okay, once you let those folks in, you're used to seeing them there. You're not going to question their presence. Probably even not going to question the presence in the server room if they're just in there saying they're emptying the trash. Let's be skeptical. Make sure that the person works for the right company. Make sure you recognize the individual. You know who they are. Make sure it's a scheduled visit. Tactics over the phone, we just mentioned a second ago. Somebody calling in and claiming to be from Microsoft, claiming to be from UPS, wanting to deliver a package at a certain time. Maybe it's off hours. Be very skeptical of all of these. Again, the IRS and Social Security would never call you over the phone asking for your information. Digitally is the one that we think of and the one we speak about most often. They're going to come in through social media, through email, through the website. All right. What are the most dangerous types of attacks? Again, these are ranked in order. Lack of employee awareness, the most dangerous threats. This is not knowing when to delete an email rather than click on it, not knowing who to let in the building, who not to, not knowing not to stick that flash drive into the machine. Phishing attempts. Again, most commonly email, but now more and more via phone, which would be would be another very common way that we're seeing today. Criminals, truly people who are out there trying to hack in, whether it be nation states, whether it be corporate, or whether it be individuals. Phishing is video phishing. You'll see this a lot due to social media. You may see this coming through email. And then there are a number of smaller examples, some of which we've hit on during this presentation. So as we go through these and we discuss them as we've been through this time, you can ask questions about them, but these are the ones that are probably going to be the biggest threat, and it gives you some idea, hopefully, from our conversation how to combat those. Bit of an eye chart here, not really going to go through it in a lot of detail, but this is small and medium businesses are under attack. If you define smaller and larger companies, under and over 1,000, all of us are under 1,000, but generally this is the way you want to carve it up. And you look at how many attacks they looked at. We'll focus on the small side. They took a look at 407 incidents that occurred. All right, and almost half of those data was disclosed. There was almost half of those were intentional. Now, how many of those weren't caught? Who knows? But of these 400 they took a look at, more than half of those, there was data that was lost. The patterns of how they take place. It's web applications. and that would include email. Everything else includes social media. It includes individual or social engineering inside the house. And then in simply errors people make, ports that have been left open account for 70% of those breaches. So that 70% can be cleaned up, pretty quickly. We've talked about the who. 3/4 are external, 1/4 are internal, and then you have the others, the multi-parties and the groups, and then actual breaches of your network, which could be a physical breach. Again, just reviewing again the motives. Money is number one. Somebody wanted to come in and either access money, access accounts, or find out data that will allow them to do so either from you or to use you as an access or a conduit into another company. Espionage, just more with the larger size companies, but they bear some grudge against you and they want to damage your company. Some of them are just people doing it for fun. Some of them are just doing it to see if they can get in and breach your company because it's what they do. Data that's compromised. Again, we've talked about this before, so I won't belabor it, but people's credentials, access, passwords, personal information, bank accounts, medical information, medical data. Think about it, if you find a nursing home or a long-term care facility and you're able to find out those individuals' names, perhaps they have money, but often more importantly, you can get into insurance fraud by using those names, contacting the families and saying, hey, we can sell you this device and you're going to get it reimbursed by your insurance company. So the individual buys a very real product, but then the threat actor then defrauds the insurance company. Again, what are your risks? Outdated software, your operating systems, everybody's updated hopefully to Windows 10 by now. Certainly want to do that. Antivirus, your additional layers of security. Again, hopefully you have that. If not, you need to get it yesterday. We talked about password security. We talked about how to enhance that, how to make those passwords so difficult that you hate doing it every day and have to use a password protector, but it will keep out those who are there for nefarious reasons. Want to make sure we're not sharing personal information when you're on vacation, how long you're going to be gone, how far away you are. Two-factor authentication, if you haven't set that up, that's where you need to get a second identification, perhaps texted or emailed to you before getting into an application or logging into a website. You see this a lot with banks. You see this with Microsoft and organizations like that. They'll require that second method of confirmation before you can finish the change or update information. Turn on the banking alerts in the company websites. If you bank with one of the large organizations or even a small one, probably has it as well. Turn them on in your app. That way, if an alert does not come through that formal notification process, you know that most likely it isn't real. If you don't have notifications to turn on, rather than listening to that phone or that message or that email, go to the bank website and make sure you verify it that way. Don't open emails if you don't know who they're coming from. This is a great example. If it's not internal and someone you know, if it's not a customer or a client, if you're simply not sure, don't open them. And for goodness sakes, don't open a link that you don't recognize. Do not download attachments. Okay, most attachments, with just a couple of exceptions, can be used to carry some sort of malware. Obviously, an EXE is so common, we all know that now. An executable file should not be clicked on, but be very, very careful what else you're clicking on. Attacks can be costly, and a lot of this is logical, so maybe you don't need to go through each of them individually, but the cost of ransomware, you're very upfront, very obvious, very significant cost upfront. You do, if you are breached and you lose data, you have to report that. There's a legal process to go through. There are attorneys, insurance companies that are going to be involved. Potentially, if it's a very large company and a very large case, law enforcement, FBI becomes involved. There then is a technical investigation that may be from law enforcement. It may be from your bank. It may come from your insurance company, but there's a cost associated with those also, oftentimes, to do those forensics. Do you lose revenue? If you cause a customer to lose some of his data, you're probably losing his revenue. Are you losing revenue because your system is down? Are you losing revenue because you're not able to do business for that day? Maybe you've lost your schedule, you've lost your billing. What happens if you're the office of my friend that I told you about who got hacked? He lost all of his receivables. He doesn't know what he needs to bill. He doesn't know what he's owed. You can lose market share if this persists for a longer period of time. Okay, you have to make security improvements that are then going to have a cost associated with them. Insurance premiums go up. The impact of your operation. How much business do you lose by being closed down? PR. You might have to go back and do more PR. You might have to go back and rebuild that reputation. And those are just the tangible. There are also intangible results that are going to cost you money. The devaluation of your brand. If it costs clients and suppliers, they might say things about you that damage your reputation. If it hits the news because you have to report it, obviously you're losing a lot of reputational capital from that. Does it affect your service level? Do you lose contracts either for existing ones who find out about the problem you had or a loss of potential business? You can be sure your competitors will come after your customers. If you're down, they'll fill the void. We have a company here in town who makes cabinets. And during the shutdown, the quarantine that we've had, a lot of their customers were not able to do business because of the areas that they were in, whereas this company was able to stay open. They garnered a tremendous amount of business from their competitors because they were able to supply cabinets during the quarantine. Internally, your employees are going to lose trust and faith in the company if they don't feel like their data is being looked after, and if the company's not having good luck stopping these types of incidents. And that then can lead to turnover. So to my mind, the intangible costs can be as important as the tangible costs. As we start to finish through this, understand that businesses of all size are victims of at least attempts, if not successful, breaches, intrusions, ransomware attacks, phishing. It happens to you, and if you don't know about it, you're probably the one who's going to have the worst outcome. If you don't believe you're having these sorts of attacks and this sorts of damage and danger, you're just not aware of it yet. And in over half the cases, a lot of these companies have to go out of business. If this takes a week for you to resolve, how much revenue have you lost, how much reputation have you lost, over half the companies are out of business within 6 months. You need a company to help you get through this process. You need cyber insurance. You need an attorney well-versed in how this goes to make sure that you're able to overcome these incidents. What's the antidote? As we wrap up today, you want to deal with the human factor internally. That's passwords. That's making sure individuals are not going to dangerous websites. That make sure that we're verifying and scheduling appointments when people are coming in to do work so that we know that they're coming, we know who's coming. Ask for a name when a technician is coming out from one of your providers. Lock down your networks. If you have people bringing in their own devices, have a guest network they can go through that prevents them having access to certain areas of your environment. Scan and monitor both internally as well as externally. Okay, so that's antivirus, that's internal monitoring to make sure you're preventing this from all happening. Don't be complacent. Don't get to the point where, hey, we're not going to test this week because we don't have time. It's Christmas, everybody's out. We're not going to test. Don't do that. Don't forget to update operating systems. Don't forget to update ransomware. Okay, let's make sure that everything's up to date. We don't lose sight of our goal, and let's make sure that we don't become complacent. We recommend a layered approach, and this is sort of the last thing I'd like you to take away today is security and risk mitigation has several different components to it. The best analogy you want to think about is bulletproof glass as opposed to the panes that are sitting in your windows in your office or your home. It's training users. It's patching devices, patching servers, patching laptops, keeping your firewall, having a firewall, first of all, keeping it up to date, keeping the firmware patched, and making sure that firewall is functioning properly. Anti-malware testing and software. Passwords we've discussed several times today. If you think I've talked about it too much, we probably haven't hit it enough because those passwords are the easiest way for someone to get in if they can crack those or if they're posted somewhere. Content filtering. And that doesn't just mean keeping employees off of Facebook or that kind of thing. It means taking a look at what's coming into your business. Can you use geofencing to eliminate areas of the country? If you don't do business in Southeast Asia, there's no reason to have traffic coming into your business from that part of the world. So that's a great example. We want to put a strategy in place that has a layered approach and touches on all of these different pieces. Our recommendation to do that is to get a second opinion. Just as if you got an opinion from a doctor, you want to make sure that you get a second opinion before a procedure takes place or before something bad happens. All right. We have the ability to come in and in about just half a day, we can come in and do an assessment of your network, of your security, look at each machine, each server, each device, how long has it been since it's updated, who's accessing it, are there people listed on your company, on your roles with passwords who are no longer there. We spend about half a day assessing, we spend about half a day compiling a document, and then that document gives you 30 or 40 pages of potential ways to remediate anything that we might find. So one thing I want to do today is let you know that we are having a promotion this month in honor of Cybersecurity Month. And we are offering a 20% discount on any of these. So at the risk of making this sound too transactional, we're willing to do that and to share with you that advantage to make sure we come in and assess your business and do these things. Take the time to do it. Take the time to look at your environment and lock it down and keep it safe. And that way, as we go forward, we will all be able to avoid a lot of these cybersecurity incidents that we've talked about today and we hear about in the news. So that's it for me today. I'll turn it back over to Ashley. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them and do the best I can to answer them. And if I can't, I will find someone brighter than me who can. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Andy. We'll go ahead and take time for questions. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions in the question box in your control panel, and we'll wait a minute to see if we have any questions come through.
I think we have a hand raised.
Yes, we do. I can. Kip, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask the question, you can.
From I guess, an email security perspective and searching attachments, because I know we all get a lot of attachments. Are there particular programs you recommend, or kind of blanket policies? For example, not allowing zip files, or maybe some sort of quarantine or something like that before an approval process?
Absolutely. There are applications that are out there. We use one that originally came out and was used originally for spam filtering called Proofpoint. But one of the things that Proofpoint offers you is a sandboxing portion where if you want to open that application in a safe environment, you can. Now, it doesn't necessarily help you with user training because you want to make sure they're not opening that on their machine. But the idea is if they have a document they question because it has a zip file or because it has some other executable file that's attached to it, they can send that to UKIP or to someone else in an IT role, and then you can open that in a sandbox environment. So yes, there are applications out there that can look at and even strip off attachments in some cases, or you could put them through a sandboxing environment that is protected and is air gapped from the network itself. So there are applications that can do exactly what you mentioned.
Good answer. Do we have any other questions? You can also raise your hand if you would like and ask the question directly, or type that into the question box. It looks like we have another question, Andy. How can an IT company help me prevent ransomware?
The biggest thing is training. We have with multiple of our offerings, and certainly also available in a standalone capacity, the ability to do training. I'll be more than happy to come out and give this presentation, or maybe a slightly shortened one, depending on your time frame, to any of your companies in person. Obviously, in this day and age, we can do it remotely as well. And it starts with that. The next step in that is some sort of ransomware training program. What we do in-house, I got a notification today that I have to go take mine for this month, but as a monthly training, it's 10 to 15 minutes long. It's not the most boring thing I've ever seen. It's fairly entertaining as far as web-based training goes. 10 to 15 minutes, and a topic for each session might be attachments like Kip just mentioned. It might be ransomware. It might be phishing attacks. It could be phone attacks that are coming in. But you have a topic each month, and then you're going to get a test email from the provider as well. And the first time we did this for a client, the client came back to our owner and said, "Hey, I've gotten 10 of these things already today. I can't keep doing this because you're just overwhelming my inbox." And our owner said, "Well, we haven't turned it on yet. You're just starting to notice some of those messages coming through from the first round of training that you did." So it is very effective. It is the one thing I would mention above all else is that you get that training for ransomware. And then beyond that, it's the normal suspects. You get a firewall in place, put antivirus in place, and make sure you're adding to those layers of the bulletproof glass.
That's great. It looks like we have one last question. How has COVID affected cyber attacks?
It has been a tremendous benefit for folks who are looking to do cyber attacks. We have had the number and the type and the variety and the creativity increase pretty dramatically during this time of quarantine, shutdown, and work from home. If you think about it, your home is not locked down as tightly as your office probably is. People are working in Starbucks and in Panera. I promised to talk about pineapples. What that is you walk into a Starbucks and you're giving away your information every time you log in. Okay, so if someone is sitting there and they put a device, and it does look like a pineapple, but they put a device in there that's going to route through that device to get to the network, they're seeing all of the traffic that you send through. And that traffic may very well be your banking information. It may be your login information to your company. So we would recommend adding a VPN. So during this time of COVID, people have been doing more work at home, doing more work in coffee shops and tea houses and other places like that. You've seen the increase in your Microsoft calls. I've gotten the ones I gave as an example, the IRS and Social Security both called my house. So you're getting more and more of that, and it's all malicious attempts to get to your information. So please be sure to call back those organizations on a separate call because this is just a great time to prey upon those whose security may be weak at home, those who may be old, those who, and expecting a call from Social Security, those who may not know some of what's going on today. So I would say let's be extra vigilant during this time.
Great. All right, I want to keep time in mind because we are getting close to the end, but is there anything that you wanted to include before we go today?
I would just say the message throughout this whole thing has been about vigilance. We can use software tools, we can use firewalls, we can use assessments like we're able to do for you, and myriad of other things. But at the end of the day, it is your own vigilance in watching what you click on, where you visit, what you download, that's going to keep you safe. So I would say be safe in your personal lives and your physical health, be safe in your cyber health. And if there's any way that we can help with that or answer questions, or if you'd like for me to give this presentation to your group, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to do so. Good luck and be well.
Great advice. Thanks, Andy. We appreciate you guys being here today. We would like to invite you to join us for our 4th annual cybersecurity panel discussion on October 22nd. We will be featuring cybersecurity experts from the FBI, legal, insurance, IT, and a consulting perspective. You can find more information about that event on our website, www.tcsusa.com/events/. And please be sure to check us out on social media. And if you have any questions that we were not able to answer today, you can send those to info@tcsusa.com. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.